All right, so today we are going to dive right back into our game, and I have had a few ideas of what kind of game I am interested in making here. So, uh, this is going to be inspired by a lot of roguelike games. Um, if you aren't familiar with the genre, they're, a bunch of original ASCII games that were played in the terminal. Sometimes they were, online multiplayer games. Even back in the 80s, we had those. And, the idea is that you are you're represented by this little character, this glyph, this at symbol, like we were drawing earlier. You sort of go around the world and you interact with things, and you have a lot of different commands and stuff like that. Um, what I want to go ahead and do though is sort of combine that idea with like typing video games, like you would play when you were a kid, or at least when I was a kid, or things like I don't know, The Typing Dead was a game that was very popular, where it's like a zombie game, but it has little characters over their head, and you type them out, and that's how you kill the zombies. So I'm going to get started working on that. Full disclaimer is I don't really have a huge, big, grand idea for what this game is. I don't have everything just completely laid out. That's actually kind of part of the goal of this is I want to show you. In addition to the things that you'll be learning as we go along, which I have some of them jotted down up here. Um, we're going to be just seeing how you tackle a big project. Now, this isn't a huge project the way like a normal 3D video game would be, or even like a 2D game like Super Mario Brothers or something. But it's still, a fairly sizable project. I expect this will be a few thousand lines of code. It'll be over a few different files. It'll take a little longer to compile. It'll be kind of complicated. We'll have to do debugging, things like that. So I want to go ahead and try just, sort of winging it and seeing, both the thought processes that I go through when I'm trying to solve these types of problems. And that can be a very good indicator and a very good lesson for someone who's just starting out. Because a lot of times you'll see big projects, right, where, someone will write a blog post about, the 40,000 lines of code that they wrote. But you won't really get a very good sense of how they actually went about doing that and the sort of day to day, minute to minute activities that led to a product like that. So we're going to start just from this very base level that we have, and then we are going to expand things out quite a bit. So if I go ahead and compile this right here, it's oh yeah, I need to be in the programming directory. Programming. So yeah, we are just sort of walking around here and such. Okay, cool. So I think the first thing to do is to get it so that we have something else on the screen. So, my idea for this is that we are going to have um, something. Let's call it an enemy. No, let's call it a creature. I think that's probably good. We're going to say that it has a position, it has a health, so it's really, kind of identical to a player in that way. Um, and we are going to also say that it has a char. So this will be like the symbol that represents it, right? So what we can do then is let's go ahead and make one. We'll say struct creature We're going to say creature.position.x equals. Let's do 5 there, but we'll set its position to be different. We'll do like 8. Then we can say that its health equals, I don't know, 10. It will say its symbol. Let's change that from C to symbol because that's, I think, just a better name representing what it is. We're going to say that it is going to equal, I don't know, a W. It'll be a wolf or something like that, or a were dragon or whatever. And then we are also going to pass that in, right? So here, creature, like that. And we are going to say else if y equals creature.position.y and x equals creature.position.x, then we are going to print f. We'll do %c, which is going to be printing it as a character, right? We'll do creature.symbol, right? Like that. So let's go ahead and compile. See, what did I do wrong here? Creature has no named C. Duh, because it's symbol. And then say too few arguments to this because we aren't passing in the creature down here. All right, so there we have our creature, and you can see we can keep moving around, and the creature still gets drawn there. Okay, cool. So there are quite a few different ways that we could start going about this, right? So there are, let me just go through and we'll highlight some of the things that we could improve about the code that's representing our game that we're doing right now, right? So one thing is, every time we want to create a new thing, we have to go ahead and pass that in to this draw level function. And then we have to handle it right here, right? We have to keep doing all of these unique things. So I want that to change because that's going to make expanding things kind of difficult. Now, the problem with that is that I don't necessarily know all of the ways that I want to expand the program yet, right? Like, I know that we will probably have more things than players and creatures, but I don't exactly know how they're going to be different, right? For example, let's say we want to draw a wall, right? Well, a wall it's more than one symbol, right? It has a position, but it also kind of has dimensions, right? It has like a width and a height. Now, we could maybe do something where we say, well, okay, a wall is only one unit, and if you want to draw like a long wall, then you just draw several individual walls, right? So like a wall is composed of blocks or something like that, right? So that's definitely something that we could do. That's, one way we could architect the code. Another way that we might want to architect the code is we have this thing, right, where we have a position and we have a symbol and we have this health, right? But like we don't really care about the health as it relates to drawing things, right? Like we're passing in this creature, but when we draw it, the only thing we're ever looking at is its position and its symbol, right? So maybe that's an indication that the differences between a player and a creature, that they sort of share something in common, right? And that would be its own new struct, right? Something like symbol, right? So the symbol would have like a position and it has a character, something like that maybe. Let's see. Other ways that we could improve this. Well, so for instance, we're just hard coding our numbers for how much of the level that we're drawing. That is probably a bad idea because, what if we said right here 10 and then right here we said 20? We can go ahead and compile that. So our first, at the start of the game, we draw the screen bigger, or I mean smaller, and then we start drawing it bigger. Well, that looks kind of weird. Um, you can see we get into this case where the two things are at the same space, right? Well, okay, so that's kind of weird. Maybe we don't want to do that, right? Because now, there's a wolf there, but we don't see that there's a wolf there. So that can be a problem. Which, and you obviously wouldn't have that in like a 3D game necessarily, because you could probably tell that there are two things in the same position. But here we have a worse problem. Not only does it look bad, it doesn't look like what it actually is, right? Um, let's see. Some other things that we could probably go ahead and improve are this thing right here, where we're checking this position all the time. In fact, I think that's the first thing that we are going to fix. So I want, instead of saying y equals player.position.y and x equals player.position, I want to go ahead and just have a function, let's call it equals, and this is going to take a position. We'll just call it POS right there, and then we'll call it POSA, and then we are going to pass in, let's do POSB, right? I need to type struct in front of there, right? And what I want this to do is return true if the things are at the same position and false if they aren't, right? So I think the best way to do that is we will say that we will return POSA.x equals POSB.x and POSA.y equals POSB.y, right? And we can go ahead and just make sure that that compiles. It does. Wonderful. And here now we can replace that. What I'm going to do is say that we have we'll do we just call it that. And then this will be POS.x equals x, POS.y equals y, right? And now we can go ahead and just say that if they are equal, and that's going to be player.position, and if that and that are equal, then we'll draw that right there. And if equals creature.position POS, then we'll draw the creature, right? So let's go ahead and compile that. We can make sure that it works. It does. Okay. So now we have a much nicer way to go ahead and pass in positions, right? And that is pretty good. So right now, really the only way that we can interact with our game world is with these inputs, right? So we have W, A, S, and D, right? Pretty classic controls for a video game. What I want to do, though, is start taking advantage of the fact that we have a keyboard so that we can do more interesting interactions than you maybe could with just a game controller, right? Like when you think about it, a game controller is, it's just some face buttons, a couple of triggers, and a couple of joysticks. So you have like 4 analog values, which are going from like -1 to 1, like the joysticks and the triggers. And then you have some face buttons, which are just, discrete, right? It's just either pressed or it's not pressed. You can maybe try to, account for if it's held or not. But we have a keyboard, which lets us input language, which can allow for really powerful interactions. And that's one of the things I kind of want to start doing with this game is getting more interesting interactions with the world than just something like moving in a direction and, I don't know, hitting something, right? I think we can do a lot more interesting types of gameplay if we have, you know, a keyboard at our disposal. So, what I want to do is have the player go into a certain interaction mode. We can say int is typing, right? That can be our interaction, right? And so what we can do is say, all right, if the player is typing, then the rules are different, right? So instead of just typing, like WASDA, like that, if you, let's say that else if C equals, we'll do a space, then we'll say player.is typing equals 1, right? In fact, actually, this is going to be a good place to introduce this. I believe we should have this. Yeah, real quick. Let me go ahead and Google for what I'm looking for here. Let's see. All right, we want bool in C. So a bool, as we have seen before, is just it's just a number. Oh yeah, it's std bool. That's right. So, a bool is just going to be 0 or 1 or true or false, right? Those are, the two different ways to think about it. And what I want to do is say that this is just a bool, right? And I want to say right here that it equals true. So the nice thing about that is it just makes the code a little bit easier to read. Like, we know we can use an integer to represent something that's true or false. We can do that just fine. What's nice, though, is that the bool sort of implies more intention to it. Like, we know if something is a bool, what we're doing with it is we're saying that it's true or false. And we can do the same thing right here with our equals. Right here, we can say, all right, it could return an int, but really all we care about is that it just returns true or false, right? So we can go ahead and do that, and I think it's just a bit nicer for legibility. So now we have two different types of input, right? We have our player, if player.is typing, sorry, if not player is typing, remember that exclamation symbol means not. So if they aren't typing, then we're in this input mode, right? So they're just moving around. Cool. And if they are typing, then they are going to be in a different input mode, right? And we don't even need to worry right now about doing anything with that. We can just go ahead and make sure that it works. So, we're moving around. Cool. If I press space and then enter, we aren't able to move around anymore, right? Because we are in we are no longer in our our moving mode, right? So, uh, yeah, so let's go ahead and say that in here, we can say if C equals space again, then we're going to say player dot is typing equals false, right? You can see that again, because of the bool, this is a little nicer to read. So I'm going to move around. I'm going to press space. I can't move around anymore. I'm in a special input mode. And then if I do that again, I'm back to moving. So, that's not super cool right now. Really, all we've done is, you can press space to cripple the player so they can't move around anymore. But what we can do now is start actually thinking about what we want this typing mode to be, right? So far, what we have seen is that we just we can only get like a character at a time, right? So, and that's why, our commands are relegated to this sort of, press a button to do a thing, press another button to do a different thing, right? But now we want to do something like, have the player type a word, and then we want to store that word somewhere, right? Which is going to be a big idea in programming. We want to store that word. And then we want to go ahead and do something with that word. Now, doing something with that word isn't very different than this WASDA thing, right? But the idea of storing it is actually kind of complicated, right? Because we don't know how long that word is, do we? And we don't know how long that word is, so we don't know how many variables we need to make. And, we can see that it would just kind of be a pain, right, to make a variable for every single character in the word, even if we knew how long it was. Even if we just said, as the game developer, we just said, hey, you can only type a word that's a maximum of 12 letters, right? Well, now we have 12 variables, and we need to call them like, not like that. Char C0, right? And then char C1, like that, right? All the way to 12. And then, when we write all of our code, we need to check, hey, does C0 equal this? Does C1 equal to this? Et cetera, which can get to be quite a pain. So, what we are going to do in the next video is look at this brand new concept for us, which is the array. And we'll use the arrays as strings, and we'll talk a little bit in the next video about what that means.